Bratton, Brown, Berger, Moon, Mosley, Roberts, Williams.
All right, we have a quorum. Today we have 6 nominees. I will announce the nominee and the sponsoring senator who will join them for a picture. If the nominee's family is here, you are welcome to join in that picture. Senators, when you are done presenting, please go over to the Senate staff desk and sign the documents that we need. Our first nominee is Scott Albers for an independent as a member of the Missouri Western State University Board of Governors. Sponsored by Senator Black.
No.
You didn't listen to what I said, did you?
I get in trouble with that sometimes, too.
Is it straight? Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Rusty Black, and I represent the 12th Senate District. I am pleased to sponsor the appointment of Scott Albers to the Missouri Western State University Board of Governors. Mr. Albers grew up on a farm in rural northwest Iowa, which is still good, and is a graduate of Galva Holstein High School, or that's the way we pronounce it, North Missouri, and went on to earn a finance degree from the University of Northern Iowa in 1996. Mr. Albers began his career working with Farmers Insurance Group and then working in the family business. Mr. Albers then went on to work for VT Industries, an industrial door manufacturer in his hometown. He was given the opportunity to move to California to help start up a facility that the company had purchased, eventually becoming the general manager of this facility while he was able to pursue his MBA at UCLA Anderson School of Business, graduating in 2007. Scott and his wife Ashley moved back to the Midwest in 2009 and began working for NORAM Cold Storage in St. Joseph, Missouri, and has made St. Joseph his home ever since. Scott and his wife have 2 daughters, Kyra and Ellie, who both attend Savannah Middle School. Mr. Albers is currently on the board of the Global Cold Chain Alliance, serving on the Finance Committee and CEO Selection Committee. The Albers family has supported the university both personally and professionally through athletic sponsorships, attending activities, fundraising events, and providing paid student internships. Thank you for your consideration on Mr. Albers' appointment to the Missouri Western State University Board.
All right, thank you. Senators, any question? Well, I have one, since no one else does. I see that you create a culture and leadership team that's highly motivated to create a great customer experience. How do you do that?
When you sell cold air and trust, you better be good at customer service. we operate a cold storage company. We support the ag community, but we don't have anything to sell. We sell service, and so we understand that our customers pay our bills every day. And the best way that we can do that, there's a lot of competition in our space, and the best way we can do that is making it easier for our customers to do their job every day. And if we make them better every day, we'll always have a customer.
So your interest in Missouri Western, do you have things that you would like to see done that are not currently done, or?
I think there's opportunities. I mean, we're definitely in a spot where, the university systems are facing change, whether it's in funding, enrollment, and those things. And it's too big of a part of St. Joe. My wife and I are not natives of St. Joe, but we have a choice of where we live. We've chosen St. Joe to be our home and where to raise our children. And St. Joe is too big of an anchor and too big of a part of our community to want to be part of it.
So I appreciate that. Now that we have other senators, does anyone else have any question? Senator Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just stepped in. Pleasure to see you, and thanks for your willingness to serve. I had an opportunity to tour Missouri Western's campus a couple years ago with Senator Luetkemeyer when I did a couple district visits throughout the state. Just out of curiosity, what are kind of some of your thoughts about the status of the university today, and what are some things that you think that you can contribute to help the university go to the next level?
You know, as we get on the board, just coming onto the board, we'll probably have a better picture of what that looks like. I think, you know, from the outside and being part of the community, the university's already making a lot of those steps. With the CTAC Center that have come on, with the partnerships around a nursing program, those are a lot of the professions and degrees that we need in our state and in our community. So they're making some good steps there. I am part of a family business. I have a finance degree. It's like, how are we good stewards of the resources that we're lucky to get, and how do we continue to make it a viable institution?
Yeah, thank you for that. And one more quick question, and again, it's just because I'm passionate about higher education. So I advocate for quite a few institutions in the state, but on my side of the state in St. Louis, it's the University of Missouri St. Louis. And what I've seen with institutions that could possibly be similar is that the institution needs a combination of a board that can not only advocate for the progress of the institution, but also be complementary to the leadership to help them be able to thrive as well. So an example would be, as a state-funded institution, it's always kind of this hesitancy from an innovative and leadership perspective because of how you feel that those ideas may be impacted by state funding. I don't believe those things are mutually exclusive. I think they should have boards that advocate for innovative opportunities, present those as good stewards to the state, and then hopefully optimize opportunities to get adequate funding to advance higher education. The other part is what I also see with four-year institutions is that it should be not only the opportunity for people who want to get a degree, but also the feeder for people who may take an alternative route and may down the road may want to look into getting an opportunity at a four-year degree. Meaning, I'm talking to people about exploring all your options. Maybe going to college right out of high school may not be your journey. Maybe you go into a profession and decide that you want to pursue a degree later. Are those things that you're receptive to, or do you feel that it's just about generating money and then we get a four-year degree and however that pans out, it doesn't matter?
No, I would track a lot of where you're going. I think the university's already started has recognized that, maybe ahead of some other universities. I'm not knowledgeable of whatever all the rest of the universities are doing. But with our CTAC Center, with our nursing degree, you know, more willing to partner with community college, and it's like, how do we create that pathway forward? Selfishly speaking, they have a supply chain management degree, which helps us fund, which we can support with some of our folks that maybe took a non-traditional route to higher education.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Well, you're in.
Perfect.
Thank you for being willing to serve.
Appreciate your time. Thank you, guys.
Next up, Bill Severn, Republican, as a member, also a member of the Missouri Western State University Board of Governors.
Well, we got to stay in. I figured it out like I did the second time. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Rusty Black, and I represent the 12th Senate District. I am pleased to sponsor the appointment of Bill Severn for the Missouri Western State University Board of Governors. Mr. Severn currently serves as President and CEO of 1623 Farnham, LLC, the Center for Secure On-Ramps to the world's biggest cloud providers. Mr. Severn has deep industry experience in fiber networks, cable, broadband, data storage, and cloud services. He was on the board of Online Tech until his family sold it in the early 2018, and currently serves as CEO and was COO of MPG Cablevision until 2011 when the company sold to Suddenlink. He enjoys being very active in the community, serving on the board of 7 nonprofit organizations over the past 15 years. Mr. Severn graduated from Kansas State University in 1990 and is the father of 3 grown children. He enjoys golf, fishing, and hunting as often as possible. Thank you for his consideration to the Missouri Western Board of Governors.
All right, any questions? Well, I have one. You are president of the leading interconnection data center in the Midwest.
That's correct.
Well, tell me about that.
So 1623 Farnham is data center in Omaha, Nebraska. It's actually an interconnection facility. So when the internet or when fiber was first run east and west in the United States, the fiber builders could either go and do leases with 10,000 farmers along the route, or they could pick the shortest path east to west, which was the 41st parallel, which is the Union Pacific Railroad line. And so most of the early fiber lines ran east and west. They all aggregate in the building that we have in Omaha. So when we talk about the internet, when any device that you hit on your phone, if you're in the state of Nebraska or most of Iowa and some parts of Missouri, when you hit enter on any device, that signal goes through our building to get to the world.
I think we need your services here. We'll talk about that later. I don't know how you even figured that out, but that's great. Anyone else have a question? Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Bill, I'd like to ask you a similar question that I asked Mr. Albers. Kind of what's your vision going on this board? And again, it all comes back to my opportunity to tour the campus. I thought it was a really good experience. At the time, I was hosted by Lisa Norton and her late husband and Senator Luetkemeyer, so I was always really surprised I didn't know that much about the university, considering some of the cool things I saw throughout the process. I was also really impressed that it seemed, as Scott even elaborated, the community seemed to be really passionate about the university outside of just hosting the Kansas City Chiefs. So what's your vision or some things you hope to accomplish in this role?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, once I get on the board, I'll have more clarity about my vision, but a couple of points I'd like to make. One, over the last 20 years, I've kind of dedicated my personal time to join boards where I thought I could make a difference in the community, and I feel like this is a real opportunity for me to take an opportunity to take my passion for betterment of the community, and whatever I can do to help Missouri Western do that's what I'd like to do. We have a tremendous amount of great amenities at Missouri Western that I don't know that we're taking full advantage of. We talked a lot before we got in here about, culture and how do you build the right culture and take advantage of that. So looking forward to that.
Thank you. And one more question. And also kind of similar to the last question I asked, I think that we're moving into a society where we need to be more intentional about how we develop the future workforce.
Yeah.
So that means that now college isn't about really, in my opinion, going and having 4 to 5 years to have fun. I think we need to figure out how do we create a curriculum that helps students identify what they would like to do and how to get on that trajectory during the process. So kind of what's your perspective about how universities should play the role in developing the future workforce and how the institution, I understand it's a business, I understand enrollment, but identifying a student's interest and then putting them on a trajectory to go into their career in the future?
Yeah, another really good question, and I think Scott hit on it pretty well. I think in some cases, I think Missouri Western is a little ahead of the curve. I was actually chairman of the board of the Chamber of Commerce when we really worked with Elizabeth Kennedy at Missouri Western on like CTAC, the early stages, and what could we do to engage like the local business community to see how we could make adjustments and change so we better align ourselves with where everything is today.
Senator Beck.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I failed to ask this question to previous candidate, Mr. Albers, but I'll ask you. And I asked a week or two ago, I asked another gentleman the same question. So there's I've been made privy to some emails that have been around in Missouri Western. As you're shaking your head, I think you possibly know or don't know. So there was some high schools, basically, excuse me, by the previous chancellor put on a blacklist where you would not be recruiting from. Is this something that, if you don't know anything about it, we can talk about it offline, but it's a concern to me that we have a public institution that is not going into some of our high schools to recruit, especially when your enrollment is about half of what it used to be. But that is troublesome to me to think that we're not going into some of these schools.
Yeah, that would be a great concern of mine. You know, like I said earlier, I've been very involved in the community from whether it be fundraising, whether it be betterment of business community, nonprofit boards, and that's the first I've heard of any of that.
Yeah,
And that would not be anything that I would support.
And again, it's, you know, I mean, it's emails that I've seen the emails part, and then there's some other questions to the validity of everything. But you know, at the end of the day, it's troubling to think that this is
That
the
would be
case.
troubling, yeah.
Yes, very, very much so.
Yeah.
So maybe we can talk about that a little bit offline, but
Love to.
I don't want to get into a whole bunch of different stuff here. So.
Yep.
Any other questions? Seeing none?
Okay.
You're in. Thanks for being willing to serve. We now have our next nominee, Richard Todd Michalski, Republican, as a member of the Missouri Western State University Board of Governors.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, for the record, Tony Luetkemeyer, representing the 34th Senatorial District, here today to present Todd Michalski as a nominee to the Missouri Western Board of Governors. Since 2008, Mr. Michalski has served as the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Gray Manufacturing in St. Joseph, where he leads the sales and marketing team and manages operations. Mr. Michalski has a strong connection to Missouri Western and is eager to contribute his expertise as a board member. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration from Missouri Western, and he has previously served as on the Missouri Western State University Foundation Board, which raises money for the university. I'm honored to have Mr. Michalski as a constituent and to support his nomination, and I urge the committee to join me in supporting his confirmation. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Williams?
Mr. Michalski, I'm going to keep it consistent. I don't want anyone to feel like I just picked them out. Similar questions as I asked the other two nominees. Kind of what's your vision going into this role? Now I'm noticing, and I hadn't had a chance to really pay full attention to it, but the board's going to change kind of quite a bit now with 3 potential new appointments. What's your vision, and what do you hope for? Okay, 4. What do you hope to accomplish in this role, and what are some things you've noticed, even from the foundation board perspective, that could be better?
Oh, just push it once. Again, a great question. I attended Missouri Western in the 90s. Western has changed a lot from the 90s to today. I think that one of the things that my vision revolves around is how do we create community in the college. In my opinion, there's a lack of student community. So how does the leadership drive community to be inclusive, where kids are having the college experience while getting their education? I don't see a lot of that in Western right now, so that'll be one of my big drivers, is to find leaders who can create community. And what was your second part?
Yeah, thank you for that. That was a really great response. And basically, it was just asking your vision and kind of some things you think could be better. I think you answered both of those questions. The only other question I would ask is kind of goes back. I'm very passionate about higher education, but also really spent quite a bit of time, at least in institutions on my side of the state, advocating on how do we create partnerships with institutions to ultimately drive students into the workforce. I think college at this point should be the feeder to the future of the workforce, and not college debt or people going and getting degrees that aren't really meaningful, and at some point not going into the workforce and being where they should be, or even having a gainful career as I think they should.
So my answer there is a little more complex. I think it starts with the secondary education in the high schools, creating pathways for the students to be prepared for college and to hopefully have a grasp of what they want to do. And I understand it can change while you're in college, but I would like to see the colleges change general studies practices to get kids in their majors earlier, because once you get into your major classes, you're more engaged. School is more enjoyable for you. So I think that the colleges have to figure out, they lose a lot of kids freshman, sophomore year because they're going through general studies. It's not interesting to them. And once they get into their majors, it becomes a great experience. I think you have to get that kid there quicker.
So should we cut out general studies?
No, I think you need to lessen general studies.
Yeah.
I think that kills a lot of educational dreams, is the general studies that they just had in high school.
So in what industry have you done a turnaround strategy?
So I took over a truck leasing company before I came to Gray that was losing about $10 million a year. The brand was bad. The service was bad. By the time I left in 5 years, we were breaking even, which isn't good, but we turned that company around in that industry.
So how does that work? I mean, when you walk in the door, what's the first thing you do?
Well, first of all, you have to be a good steward of your expenses, and you have to understand where the expenses are, what expenses are acceptable. You have to control the money that's going out first, and then you have to work on the customer experience and the value proposition so you can find new customers. And you have to improve that customer experience, and then while controlling expenses.
So I agree you have to control the money going out, but from my own experience in the trucking industry, you also have to control the money coming in. And I think a lot of people go into business and they're like, oh, okay, we'll charge to you and we'll let that go, let it go, let it go. I mean, cash flow is the name of the game.
It is.
Yeah.
If you give them a service, you're owed your money.
Right.
Right, and at Gray, I'm completely responsible for all of our receivables, and absolutely cash flow is king, and when people owe you money, you need to collect it.
So I only have one more question. I also was responsible for collecting money. I bet we went about it differently. So what do you say when you call someone who owes you money?
Well, I have not made those calls. I have people that call for me,
Oh,
but when
there you go.
when I made those calls, it was matter of fact that, this invoice is dated this time, you receive the services or you receive the products. It's only fair that we get paid, and usually just being honest and upfront.
I appreciate your time and your answers. Any other questions? Senator Beck?
Good morning. So this will be the same question that I just asked Bill. So there's had knowledge of some emails that are out that basically the Chancellor blacklisted quite a few high schools, on both sides of the state. And I don't. The policy is wrong, I think, in general, because they're public institutions and it's a public. And due to the fact that I know your enrollment's roughly half of what it used to be back in 2012, my question to you is: Do you support this policy, or will you check into this when you get on the Board of Governors?
I would check into it. I think that I have to look at all of these as prospects, as possible customers. And the more prospects you have, the more often you're going to close and get someone to your school. I wouldn't support the policy of blacklisting any school. I would like to understand why that was done, what data was used, what spurred that decision, and should you not work to fix the problem before you blacklist a school. I think that's unacceptable.
No, I appreciate that, and maybe we can talk a little bit offline on this, because I don't want to get into the whole thing, because some of this is what it is. I have seen the emails, but appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your answers. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for your time.
We now have our next nominee, Jennifer Keller, as a member of the State Committee of Psychologists. Senator Cierpiot.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and Senators. Mike Cierpiot from the 8th Senate District in Southeast Jackson County. I'm here today to present Jennifer Keller as a member of the State Committee of Psychologists. Jennifer has multiple degrees in psychology to include marriage and family therapy, clinical psychology, and psychology and sociology. She also has an extensive employment background in psychology as well as experience with teaching in her field. I think Jennifer would be a great asset to the State Committee of Psychologists, and I encourage the committee to support her. Your turn.
Okay. Thank you for being here today. I've thought of a couple things, and I won't bring them up. I'm thinking. Everyone we're talking to today, has a really interesting background, including you. As a director of behavioral health, we seem to have a lot of behavioral problems today. Mm-hmm. Do you have any indication of why that is?
Did I push it? No, okay. I think one thing is I think we're a little bit better at diagnosing, but I also think that sometimes we over-pathologize things. So I think it really depends on the circumstance, but I do think that there are better interventions in the early childhood, and so one of my focuses is on more proactive approaches to prevent those problems later on in life. But I do think it's complicated because I do think we're better at diagnosing, but I also think because we are better at diagnosing, then people seek diagnoses and there's more information out there and there is some overdiagnosis in certain areas.
So I feel like we have younger people who are not very resilient, and I have my own ideas of why that is, but it's something I think that we need to change the trajectory for them. It seems like there's just so many people who can't even handle life.
Yes.
And what do we do about that?
Well, we see that also in those entering the workforce for the first time. I definitely think part of it is working with parents to try to have a more realistic approach about life. I have my own opinions about things like everybody wins. I think it really does harm to kids, when you get into life. And so trying to really work with parents on parenting strategies that are more effective to really help them be healthy, productive members of society. I think that's one. I also think in the schools, what you, and the way in which you perform is what you get, right? As opposed to everybody gets to pass, you get to go back and get, redo things. I mean, I didn't get to do that. And so I think sometimes just having some natural consequences better prepares kids for life. And so from our field standpoint, early intervention and trying to help parents do some of these things sooner is pretty important.
The reality is everybody loses, and all we talk about is everybody needs to be a winner.
Right.
So people aren't prepared for that loss.
Yes.
And then all kinds of problems result. Any questions or comments from the committee? Well,
Okay.
thank you for
Thanks.
your willingness to serve. Thanks for being here today. Next is Kent Oberkrom, James Kent Oberkrom, Republican, as a member of the Board of Probation and Parole. With Senator Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Sandy Crawford, District 28. It's my pleasure this morning to present to you James Kent Oberkrom, or I call him Kent, and you can too. for the Board of Probation and Parole. And I've known Kent for the last 3 or 4 years when I acquired Henry County in my district, and so I've gotten to know him over those past few years. I think it's really important when we sponsor people for different boards that they have an adequate background to serve in those positions. Kent was a deputy sheriff, he was a police officer, he was also a deputy juvenile officer, and last but not least, he served as Henry County Sheriff for 28 years. So he has over 30 years in law enforcement experience. I think that's really important to serve, a really important background to serve in this position from, and I'm very happy to sponsor him this morning.
Thank you. I see you're an Eagle Scout.
I am. Thank you.
My husband's an Eagle Scout. So I think one of the problems we have is we're not having people serve their sentence. We have a lot of comments and issues, I think, because of that. People are sentenced to prison and then they're out. How do you feel about that, or what can you tell us about that?
Well, I think it goes to the phrase catch and release. We talked a lot about that when I was sheriffs, and sheriffs were concerned about that. Somebody gets sentenced and they're right back out. I previously had served on the board and appointment with Governor Parson, and one of the things that I saw in my prior service on the board was real inconsistencies in sentencing. Somebody for manslaughter might get, coming out of major metropolitan areas in this state, may get 4 years, and in outstate they were maybe getting 8 or 10. Sometimes people serve a lot of time in a county jail, and they get credit for that time. So if they get a 4 or 5 year sentence and they've sat in a county jail for 2 years, that time is calculated in to that process. So it creates a poor image. I think we need to take a look at some of those sentencing guidelines, which doesn't really deal with the board, but I think the board needs to look at some policies, and probably we need to look at some statutes that maybe would better control that and create some more time for folks, certainly for more serious offenses.
So we seem to have in the rural areas people with mental health problems that are in the county jail forever. Have you witnessed that happening? Are you aware of that happening?
In my last term as sheriff, it was very frequent that we had a lot of people that were pre-trial waiting on mental health evaluations. 2 years, the longest I saw when I left office, we had a gentleman that had been there for 4.5 years pre-trial. So that's a concern. What those services are certainly needed for folks before they come to prison, and certainly as they're being released if they still have mental health issues. I think the Department of Corrections has some good mental health services that are provided to inmates while they're in house, and providing some medication relief for that. But when they hit the street, there's some concerns about that continuity of care.
So I don't really know the exact workings of the probation and parole. I guess they're sentenced and then they're eligible, and then they come before you and you hear the story and decide if it's a good...
Yeah, basically there are statutory considerations, there's policy considerations, but once they arrive, then hearing dates are set, and then we provide a hearing for those folks. Sometimes we can give them a better date, but by statutes, there are sometimes dates that they have to be released by. They're going out whether we like that or not, whether they're necessarily prepared or not. Like a home plan. A home plan doesn't necessarily, lack of a home plan doesn't necessarily prevent somebody from being released. They have CR, what's called conditional release dates, and maximum dates. So they have to be released at that maximum date.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Any other? Senator Williams?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you. Thanks for your willingness to serve. So I just had a couple questions, and you're in a unique situation because you've actually had some experience on the board with the previous administration. Yes. What are some things that you've seen since your time engaging in that capacity, and what do you think are some things that can be better? Clearly, we've seen a lot of challenges with the Department of Corrections, and my personal and professional belief is that the board should be concurrently ensuring that people are held accountable, but also trying to figure out how the Department of Corrections has a wraparound service approach to address issues around recidivism. So kind of what are your thoughts? And I know
So
that's a kind
I
of.
think one of the things when I served previously that I saw that concerns me and concerns me today, and I don't know this as a matter of fact, I'm told that we're one of the few states, if not the only state, that doesn't prepare for hearings. We do hearings cold. We walk into the room, there's files, and generally you're busy writing in a file instead of listening to questions that are being asked of the inmate. And that process out. I developed my own kind of form, if you will, where I do that so I can focus and listen and see what, look at body language and listen to what inmates are truly saying, because it's really about that end of the day is about, protection of the community and making the best decision possible for that. So I think that, and there's those chronic offenders, those long-term offenders, folks that have been in and out of prison since they're 18, they're 50, 60 years old. Sometimes I challenge myself is, what more do we offer them? What is out there for them from a standpoint of rehabilitation? I think we want to continue to do that. I'm not saying we don't, but I certainly have that concern about they're just going to be back in, I think. They're going to reoffend or do something to hurt somebody out in the community because that's all they've ever known all their life.
Yeah, and thanks for answering that. I guess, and I'm even more concerned at the fact that they don't provide the proper preparation to be able to assess each individual inmate's needs when they come up for eligibility. Yeah. One thing I had an opportunity to do is spend quite a bit of time with, for many years, and we still work together to this day in a lot of different capacities. The Chief Probation and Parole Officer for the Eastern District. And they had a really good, almost probably one of the most successful rates around recidivism in the country. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that I noticed they did for a lot of people who either came up for eligibility or were released was that wraparound service approach. It's very concerning when you think about the fact that there are people that have never committed a crime that still deal with the social determinants of health. They have so many things from their environment that impact how they go about their day-to-day life, let alone someone that has made a mistake, figuring out how do you get them on a pathway to be a model citizen. That is really a big part of our responsibility for anyone that goes into the custody of the state. So I guess, my question would be, how do we, whether it's from the legislative perspective or working with our new director, to provide the board with the tools that they need to be able to make the best decision possible when someone comes up for eligibility? And then how do we ensure that we provide resources for the whole person to ensure that they get a fighting chance to be a model citizen, despite the fact that they may have made a mistake?
Sure. Let me say first, I think we have a lot of good programs out in the community. Could we use more? Yes, and more means dollars. You've got to fund those programs to take care of folks out on the street. I think it's that continuity of care. When I was sheriff, one of the things, we started a work release program. We started a pre-trial program when I was sheriff. So we had people just sitting in jail because they were poor. It wasn't that they were grave risks to the community where they could be released and go out in the community being supervised, not released through a bondsman where nobody's checking in on them or doing things. And we saw great success with both of those programs where people could do that. I've had the opportunity over the years to visit with a lot of offenders. A lot of offenders talk about having a job. If they could get a job and when they get released or get out, somebody would offer that to them and help take care of those some of those issues. Certainly family support, friend support is really, really key. When you have somebody whose family has disowned them, or maybe they're even homeless and they're looking to be released, probation, the parole officer out on the street is going to have to help provide most of those services, try to focus and get them steered in the right direction.
Just lastly, Madam Chair, if possible, I'd love to stay in contact with you as you go through this process, assuming that you're confirmed. The other thing I would recommend, if possible, to consider some of your future colleagues, hopefully, or old and again colleagues. There's an interesting movie that came out in the 80s called Trading Places. Mm-hmm. And I always found that movie to be fascinating because I felt that it was a true overview of the dichotomy of our country when it comes to those who have access to things and those who does not. And it was fascinating seeing Dan Aykroyd in this movie, that he went from a guy who was very successful working on, in the financial services industry in the country club to becoming a criminal overnight. And I think that was a true lesson for us in terms of understanding that if we provide the whole person with the needs that that I believe they deserve, it would be fascinating on the trajectory, even if they make a mistake, how much of a model citizen they can become. So let's stay in touch. I'm glad that you're willing to serve. I hope the board consists of people who have a background and empathy to be able to make some really good decisions for folks in the correctional facility system.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Luetkemeyer.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your willingness to serve. When I first got elected, I had the opportunity to sit down with the then director of the Department of Corrections and kind of go through high level all the offenders that we had in our prison systems across the state. There's this narrative out there, I think, that we have this over-incarceration problem in Missouri, that we've got these nonviolent, these droves of nonviolent offenders in our prison system. I can tell you, after meeting with Ann Presythe and going through those numbers, I don't think that that's the case. I think that most of the people that we have in our prison system are there, and they're there for a good reason. I used to clerk for a judge who used to say, you put people in prison who you're afraid of, not just because you're mad at them. And I think Missouri does a pretty good job of that. Most of the people that are in the Department of Corrections, the overwhelming majority, are people who society should be afraid of, and that's the reason that they're there. So one of the things that you will get to do once you're confirmed to the board is you'll get to make the decision if somebody's eligible for early release as a parolee. And what I just want to get an idea of is, when you have somebody who's up for potential parole, what are the factors that you would look at in deciding whether to grant parole or to deny it?
Well, as I previously said, I think the main thing is home plan support out in the community where they're going. What services they need, and are those services available where their home plan is too? And certainly, we see a lot of drug stuff. How availability, what drug programs have they been through, and those kinds of things to help them not get reengaged in that issue. So those are probably the top three things that I have looked at as a prior board member.
And then
moving forward.
I know I had caught this in one of your prior answers, but you had talked about prior recidivism as being a factor too. If somebody's been released on parole multiple times before and they've just shown a propensity for reoffending, I assume that would be a mark against them.
Yes, okay. Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, thank you for your willingness to serve.
All right, thank you.
Our next nominee is Angela Nelson as the Director for the Department of Commerce and Insurance, sponsored by Senator Fitzwater.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Travis Fitzwater, 10th Senate District, and I'm bringing before you my constituent, Angie Nelson. She is from Callaway County and most recently worked for AAA Missouri, a role she's held since 2020. She oversaw all public and government affairs across 17 territories within the state. In addition to this oversight, Angie was responsible for internal business communication to ensure effective policy development. Angela is a graduate of William Woods University in Fulton, where she earned both her Bachelor of Science and MBA. Her professional journey began in '95 as a paralegal to Roger G. Brown and Associates. After 6 years in that role, she transitioned to the insurance industry, becoming an insurance producer for State Farm Insurance Agency. In 2002, Angie accepted a position as an insurance product analyst at the Missouri Department of Commerce and Insurance. Over the course of 18 years, she held several key roles within the department, including workers' compensation specialist, market conduct analyst, manager of the property and casualty section, director of the Consumer Affairs Division, and director of the Market Regulation Division. Angie then served as manager of regulatory compliance at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas City from March to November of 2020 before assuming her role with AAA Missouri. Throughout her career, Angie has been recognized with several awards, including the Graduate College Award from William Woods in 2012 for her efforts on behalf of the Missouri insurance consumers, the Certificate of Recognition from the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, and the Paul D'Angelo Memorial Teaching Award from the Insurance Regulatory Examiners Society. And I will say my own comments that she's incredibly impressive. I'm super proud that she's from Callaway County. I'm also thrilled that not only is she from our county, but she's going to, ideally, if she gets confirmed, be running a department she has served in for 18 years and has a ton of experience across the department, which I think speaks highly to her ability to take on this role and do it well.
All right, thank you. I have a question, not many because we've already talked like a lot, but looking at the topic of work comp, I think the health insurance market, when we had Obamacare, which in my opinion really knocked out people's ability to get just the insurance they wanted, and then, I don't have to run over that, but I think then work comp increases. Did you see that, or do you feel that, or?
Well, during the period of time that I was a workers' comp specialist, we absolutely had a tightening in the workers' comp market, and yes, rates rose incredibly high. Over the last few years, we've seen some really good trends. Employers are doing a very good job improving workplace safety, which means the frequency, the number of claims that are occurring on the workplace are actually going down. What we have seen, unfortunately, is the types of injuries are more severe, making them much more costly. So we really need to focus back, I think, as a state of trying to encourage different types of workplace safety measures to see if we can't try to bend that severity curve. But no, workers' compensation is always a major economic issue, and I promise you it will be one of the things that will be top on my agenda to keep a close eye on.
So one of the things that I've personally seen is, especially for our middle-class families, if they can't afford insurance, so if something happens to them on the weekend, then they come in on Monday, and the next thing you know, they have a claim. And those are very hard to dispute, and you don't even want to. It has become a very difficult situation. So
Right.
I appreciate your experience and knowledge, and I think you'll do a great job.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Senator Williams?
I just want to go on record. I've had an opportunity to work with you over the years, and it's been completely delightful, and I think the governor made a really good choice with this one. Thank you.
I just want to echo Senator Williams' comments. It's great to have you. Thank you for your willingness to serve, and watching your drive and love for public safety, working on an issue that we worked on very hard. Really appreciate you being here, and thank you for your hard work.
Thank you, Senator.
You're very popular.
I'll try to remember
So I think
that.
that's the end of that. I don't think anyone else has any comments or questions. We appreciate your willingness to serve. Thank you.
Senator.
This concludes our hearing. I make a motion for us to enter. Hold on. I just got ahead of myself. You all don't have to stick around if you don't want to. We're just going into executive session to put everybody together and pass them on to the next level. Thank you. That concludes our hearing. I make a motion for us to enter executive session. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? We're now in executive session. I now move we roll all four nominees, I think there's more than four, into one slate. Do I have a second? Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no more discussion, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? We now have a slate before us. I move that we do pass the slate out of committee. Do I have a second? Second. Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing no more discussion, Mr. Secretary, call the roll.
Senators O'Laughlin.
Aye.
Luetkemeyer, Bean, Beck, Bratton, Brown, Berger, Moon, Mosley, Roberts, Williams. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 1.
By a vote of 7-0, we do pass the slate. I now move that we adjourn. Do I have a second? All those in favor say aye. We are now adjourned.